I took a job digging a hole in the mountains. Now I can't stop coughing up black dust. Part 1 by Lex Kennedy. I met Plato in a holding cell after the kind of night that ends with your face down on pavement, explaining to a cop why you can't remember your own address. Public intoxication. My third arrest that month. Not that anyone was counting, except the landlord who'd already started the eviction paperwork. I was a special kind of broke where you start googling things like cell plasma near me and actually click the links, reading about needle gauges and waiting periods like you're researching a doctoral thesis instead of admitting you're completely fucked. Plato was older than me by maybe a decade, with greying dreads pulled back in a ponytail and the kind of steady, weathered calm that only comes from having survived worse nights than this one. We got to talking the way desperate men do in holding cells, swapping war stories about landlords and bills and job interviews that ghost you 3 days before rent's due. The usual soundtrack of American poverty. He listened more than he talked, nodding in the right places, and I must have looked as hollow as I felt because eventually he leaned in close and dropped his voice to maybe a whisper. Saw a posting downtown yesterday. Construction crew. Deep country work. Way up in the hills past Thurberg. They're paying $200 a day. Cash. Plus lodging. No drug tests. No background checks. You just need your own boots and gloves and a birth certificate to prove you're over 18. $200 per day. I would have dug ditches in hell for that kind of money. He fished a torn piece of receipt paper from his pocket and slid it across the bench. A phone number in blurred ink. They're hiring fast. Like, suspiciously fast. But the money's real. I called from the payphone outside the precinct the second they released me. A man answered on the second ring, his voice like stones grinding together in a riverbed. He didn't ask my name, didn't ask for references or experience. Just 2 questions.
Got your own tools?
And...
You over 18?
I said yes to both.
Motel 6 on Route 9. Rooms paid for tonight. Be there by dark. Van leaves tomorrow at 6 a.m. sharp.
The line went dead. I spent my last $40 on gas to get there. Rent money? Grocery money? Fuck it. When Plato got released an hour after me, I asked if he was going too. He looked at that scrap of paper in my hand for a long, calculating moment. Then at me, then back at the number. Something unreadable passed across his face. Yeah, he said, exhaling slowly. Yeah, man. Someone's gotta keep you from spending that per diem on a neck tattoo or some other stupid shit. The office was a motel parking lot lit by flickering sodium lights and the neon glow of a vacancy sign that buzzed like a trapped wasp. Our foreman, Buzz, showed up 20 minutes late, looking nothing like any foreman I'd ever seen. Late 20s, arms sleeved in faded prison tattoos, wearing basketball shorts and flip-flops like he was headed to a backyard barbecue instead of a job site. He had a clipboard but didn't look at it, didn't ask for our names or IDs or any kind of paperwork. Just handed each of us a motel room key and a sealed white envelope. Inside mine, 10 crisp $20 bills. $200. Real money. Heavy in my hand. The doubt I'd been carrying since the phone call melted away like frost in morning sun. This was legitimate. Had to be. Van leaves at 6 a.m, Buzz said, already walking away. I almost listened, but my burner, some cracked screen Android I'd lifted from a Walmart return bin, was the only thing I owned that still felt like mine. I've been using it to type notes to myself ever since the eviction notices started sliding under the door like love letters from hell. Never posted them anywhere, just thumb-typed in the Notes app when the panic got too loud, then locked the screen and pretended the words were safe inside. I private confession booth that ran on cheap electricity and desperation. So I kept it, tucked it in the inner pocket of my jacket with the screen against my ribs, airplane mode and silent, pretending I was obeying orders. Plato noticed. Of course he did. "Solar panel folds up smaller than a road map," he murmured, while we loaded the van, voice pitched low enough the others couldn't hear. "Monocrystalline, 20 watt. I hang it over a pine bow, run a USB-C down to whatever needs juice. Keeps a phone alive forever, if you're careful with the brightness." I asked why he bothered. "Because some stories need to outlive the teller," he said, and wouldn't explain. That should have been red flag number 1. There were 8 of us crammed into a beat-up 15-passenger van the next morning. All men, all looking like they'd crawled out of the same desperate hole I had. Nobody talked much during the drive. We rolled north for over an hour, watching pavement turn to gravel, turn to a rutted dirt road that wound up into thick green hills that seemed to close in around us like a fist. The air coming through the cracked windows got noticeably colder, smelling of wet earth and pine, and something else underneath. Something old and mineral and vaguely wrong in a way I couldn't name. We finally stopped at what looked like an abandoned trailhead. No fence posts waiting, no lumber, no pallets of supplies or concrete mix or any of the shit you'd expect at a construction site. Just trees and a trail disappearing into shadow. "Everybody out," Buzz called. "Grab your tools. Site's about 2 miles in." One of the crew, an older guy with a face like sun-dried leather and hands that had seen 40 years of hard labour, finally spoke up. "Hell of a hack for fence work." Buzz didn't answer, just started walking. We followed because what else were we going to do? The per diem was already in my pocket, already spending my head on rent and food and maybe a new pair of boots that didn't give me blisters. My Goodwill specials were already rubbing my heels raw. Plato stayed close to me during the hike, eyes constantly scanning the tree line, jaw tight. His whole body had gone tense and alert in a way I'd never seen before. "Man, this is a long way for a fence," he muttered, more to himself than me. When the old guy said it louder, "They told me we was putting up a barn," and somebody else laughed, that nervous, disbelieving laugh that means you know something's wrong, but you're not ready to admit it yet. My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. Buzz kept walking, didn't acknowledge the question, didn't slow down. Then, we broke through the tree line into a clearing, and every thought in my head stopped dead. The hole. It wasn't a hole, not really. It was a mouth carved into the mountain. A perfect dark rectangle, maybe 10 feet by 12, punched straight down into the earth with the edges too clean and too precise to be natural. No drill marks, no blast patterns, just smooth walls descending into blackness, like someone had taken a cookie cutter the size of a studio apartment and stamped it into the ground. A massive mound of fresh black dirt sat beside it, and I mean black. Not brown, not clay red, but the colour of deep space, of places light never reaches. A thick steel cable ran from a pulley system jerry-rigged between 2 pine trees, disappearing down into the dark. About 6 feet below the surface, a boulder the size of a compact car was wedged on a narrow ledge. Below that, a single aluminium extension ladder, the kind you buy at Home Depot for cleaning gutters, extended down into nothing. The air around it smelled wrong. Ozone and wet stone, sure, but underneath, there was something else. Something stale and ancient that made the back of my throat itch and my teeth ache like I was chewing at aluminium foil. Nobody said shit for like 10 seconds. Plato grabbed my arm so hard I figured I'd have his fingerprints branded into my skin, but I didn't flinch. Wouldn't give the hole a satisfaction. "Look at the edges," he whispered, voice barely audible. "T, look at those edges. That's not dug. That's cut. That's machined." He was right. The walls were sheer, smooth, straight up and down like someone used a giant cookie cutter. Not like anything natural. "And that ladder," his voice cracked. "That's not for building something. That's for going down. We're not builders here, man. We're diggers. Or we're bait." Buzz started barking orders about shifts and buckets and rotation schedules. Something about hauling dirt up from below. One man down filling buckets, while two worked the pulley system. I barely heard him. I was staring at the hole, and I swear on everything I've ever believed in, the hole was staring back. Not metaphorically. I could feel the tension on me, like pressure, behind my eyes. They put us to work immediately. The system was brutally simple. Climb down that rickety ladder, fill industrial buckets with whatever you find, clip them to the cable, signal the surface crew to haul them up. Rotate every hour or so nobody gets tired. Nobody explained what we were digging for. Nobody mentioned permits or geological surveys or any of the regulatory paperwork that's supposed to exist before we start tearing into a mountain. The old guy from the van, Ray I think, worked without complaining. Even cracked jokes about the weight of the dirt. "Ah, this is as heavy as my ex-wife's expectations," he said, and got a few exhausted laughs. Plato didn't laugh. He kept staring at the tree line, at the edges of the clearing. That's when I noticed the old collapsed shack back in the woods, half consumed by moss and rot, and on a nearby rock face, barely visible under decades of weathering, I saw symbols. Flaking white paint and sharp angles and spirals that seem to shift when you look at them directly, making my eyes water and my head pound. That night, they set up camp in the clearing. Generator lights, a circle of tents around a fire pit, the whole 9 yards of backcountry operation. It hadn't rained in weeks, according to Buzz. The ground was cracked, dusty, dry as bone. Plato and I were assigned to share a tent. He didn't talk much after we zipped ourselves in, just sat with his arms wrapped around his knees, staring at the nylon wall like he could see through it to something beyond. Finally, voice barely above a whisper, "We bounce the moment we got Buzz for, man. Not when Buzz says we're done. The second we can split, we ghost. Middle of the night if we gotta." I'd known Plato for less than 48 hours, but I'd never heard him sound like that. Scared. Actually scared. "Yeah," I said. "I hear you." They found Ray the next morning. His tent was flooded. About a foot of murky, ice-cold water sloshing around inside. He was face down in it. Drowned. The ground outside his tent was cracked and dry. Not a puddle within 50 feet. Not a trace of moisture anywhere except inside that one tent. Buzz called it a freak accident. "Canteen must have leaked during the night. Got disorientated. Maybe hit his head. These things happen on remote sites." One of the older crew members, a guy with a grey beard who looked like he'd worked 1,000 sketchy jobs, just like this one, just shook his head. Not surprised, not shocked, resigned. "Always something," he muttered, to nobody in particular. "Bad air, rockfall, flooding in a drought. Mountain doesn't like being dug into." The way he said it. Like this was normal. Like he'd seen it before. I wanted to leave right then. Pack up, walk back down that trail, hitchhike to literally anywhere else. But I did the math. 3 days at $200 a pop was $600. $600. Man, I could pay the back rent, hit the grocery store instead of the dollar menu, maybe even get that cracked tooth fixed before it kills me. $600 meant maybe I didn't have to suck dick for gas money this month. The per diem felt heavy in my pocket, heavier than paper and ink should feel. That afternoon, while the crew was loading Ray's body into a tarp, Plato walked over to the rock face with the symbols. He studied them for a long time, reaching out like he might touch them, then jerking his hand back like he'd gotten shocked. "You see it too?" I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. "It's not graffiti," he said quietly, not looking at me. "Graffiti says I was here. This says you shouldn't be." The symbols seemed to move when I looked at them too long. Spirals turning inward. Angles that didn't quite obey geometry. I looked away. My head was pounding. That night, Plato didn't sleep. He sat at the tent entrance with the flap partially unzipped, staring at the hole. It was maybe 30 yards away, just a rectangle of deeper darkness in the dark clearing. But I could hear it breathing. I swear to God. A low, wet, rhythmic sound, like lungs the size of houses, slowly inflating and deflating. "Plato," I whispered. "You hear that?" He didn't answer for a long time. Then, voice hollow and distant. "We're not digging, T." "What?" "We're not digging. We're excavating. There's a difference." "What the hell does that mean?" He finally turned to look at me. His eyes are bloodshot, wide, reflecting the moonlight like an animal's. "You dig to build something. You excavate to uncover something that's already there." He pointed at the hole. "That's not new. That's old, ancient. And we're opening it." I didn't sleep that night. Just laid there, listening to the breathing sound that might have been wind through the trees, or might have been something else entirely. The per diem envelope was under my sleeping bag. $200. Blood money. But it was the only money I had. Plato didn't sleep. I woke up sometime at the blind hours and saw him cross-legged by the dead fire, phone angled toward a paper bag he'd pulled from his pack. The pages were tissue thin, gilt edges green in the screen glow. He wasn't reading, he was copying, thumb typing line after line into a note he titled "For Tea." I whispered, "Homework?" He didn't look up. "Insurance." When he finished, he Bluetooth beamed the file to my burner, then shut his screen. William Blake, 1789, a chimney sweeper's song. I read it twice. The sweepers are sold by their fathers, locked in black coffins, promise God will father them if they're good boys. In the end, the priests and kings who make up a heaven of our misery walk away whistling. Ask Plato why he gave it to me. Just always keep it in mind, T. Just keep it in mind. When my mother died, I was very young, and my father sold me while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, weep, 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 weep.